Hello and welcome to another episode of the Popcorn Conspiracy, and we're on location again today because we're between film screenings at the moment, and there's a lot that we had to catch up with. So we thought we did a couple last year on location, and everyone seemed to think that it added a little bit of a vibe to it. So we thought we'd do a couple more on location episodes today. But I'm Dave G.
And I'm Kyle.
And today we're taking a look at one of the Oscar-nominated films for this year, Aftersun, which is directed by Charlotte Wells and also written by Charlotte Wells. And it basically tells the story of Sophie Leslie Patterson, played by Frankie Corio, or Corio, that might be, if it's said the same as the Geelong suburb, who goes on holidays with her father, Callum, played by Paul Mescal. And the reason that they go on holidays in Sophie's mind is to spend time together with her father. But as you learn throughout this film, Callum is going through some clinical depression and some pretty traumatic experiences in his own life, and he sees it as a final holiday with his daughter. The film itself takes the shape of a coming-of-age story. Sophie begins to learn about love, romance, the modern world, what it's like going from being a girl to a woman, all on this holiday. So, mate, this is a pretty emotional, heartfelt film to sit down and watch. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's a very different kind of film, looking at these kind of this kind of subject matter. It originally began as much more of a work of fiction, and Charlotte Wells, during production, she went back, started looking at her own past and her own relationship with her parents and growing up as a young girl, and it very quickly almost became sort of like an autobiographical type of film. And I think that's the film's greatest strength. It's very, very honest in how it handles the material. It's pretty heavy. Like, if you read between the lines of this film, the subject matter is pretty heavy. There's a lot of really dark things going on inside Callum's head while he's still trying to He's still trying to do his best to be a good father, but you can tell he's a young guy and he's got a lot of problems, but he's trying to hold in there. And but what I really enjoyed about the movie is, although it dealt with these kind of things, it was very, very realistic in how it dealt with them. It wasn't there aren't a whole lot of over the top dramatic moments and outbursts of emotion, but it's still a very emotional film overall when you look back after watching it. And it kind of, you might even look back at your own past and your own childhood and your relationship with your own guardians or parents or what have you. But what did you think of it, David?
Yeah, it's very natural as well. I think that's one of the things I've found with it. A lot of the scenes between Callum and Sophie, you almost wonder if they're ad-libbed. They're that natural. And I'm liking that more and more in films these days. We're seeing a lot of films that have that more natural feel rather than that scripted feel, and I think that's what makes this film so special. But also the acting performance of Frankie Corio. She is absolutely fantastic in this film. Such a young actress to be thrown into the deep end with such an emotional film, especially given that she doesn't have like a huge background of acting. In fact, she's only done one short film, aside from this. So she's really been thrown in. I think it's actually kind of, I don't want to say offensive because it's a too strong a word, but I feel it's kind of terrible that Paul Mescal got an Oscar nomination for this and she didn't.
Yeah.
Because I think she is really, really good in this as well. He is great in it as well, but there's scenes in this movie that she has to carry on her own because he's absent from her on the holiday. And some of those scenes are exploring intimacy and things like that, which is pretty full on for a first time actress in a feature film. So
I think this isn't maybe even her first role. I'm not sure if she's ever actually done anything before, which is very impressive considering.
According to her IMDb, she's done one short film.
Yeah,
so
that's really it. And she really, in a way, she's got like an equal lead performance in this movie with Paul Mescal.
Yeah.
And as you say, it's kind of disappointing that she didn't receive an Oscar nomination, or she isn't getting a lot of the same kind of kudos that Mescal is getting. But it's interesting because a lot of the movie it is through her eyes, and a lot of the stuff it goes over the top of her head. We should say that the movie is partially it's told as a flashback. There are periodic times where you will see Sophie as an adult woman,
played by Celia Rolson Hall, for those playing along at home.
And it kind of her flashing back in basically looking back at this final vacation that she had with her father, and maybe trying to understand him a little bit better. And it's just very, very well done in the way that there's little subtle things that that Callum is doing that you, as a child, Sophie, it just goes straight over the top of her head, as I say. But as an adult looking back, you say, there's deep-seated problems here in his behavior. There's things that he's doing that aren't safe, that aren't mature, and at times almost their relationship is more like a brother and sister. There are people in the movie that actually confuse them with as a brother and sister pairing,
he's a very young dad.
And so it's I think the reality of the movie, I think, is really what makes this so interesting. It's just, it really does feel very nostalgic and very much like you're kind of a fly in the wall, just watching these two people on kind of a little bit of an awkward vacation together.
Yeah, it's interesting too, reading some of the stuff online and talking to some of the people who were at the same screening as us that have come out and said that they missed some of the key things that Charlotte Wells said about Callum as a character in the film, like where it's, instead of just spelling it out what happened to him, it's told in a kind of artistic way. How did you see those scenes?
I thought it was very well done. Like, visually the movie is amazing. I think it's the cinematography, Gregory Oakey, or Oak. It's set in Turkey, so a lot of it looks very. It's like beautiful locations and beautiful sun-swept beaches and all this stuff. But the whole movie, it's very almost like sun-bleached as well. Like it's kind of a little bit over contrast, kind of like you're looking back at old photographs.
Yeah. And
because that, like, you really do get a sense of emotion just from watching what's happening. It's not a very, like I said, it's not a very overly dramatic, melodramatic movie, but you do get that real nostalgia feeling while watching it.
Yeah. The other thing I felt really worked with this as well was the soundtrack. It has an absolutely amazing soundtrack. It has popular songs of that time, like the Macarena, My Oh My by Aqua, but the ones I was more impressed by were some songs that I feel are like less known to people. So Road Rage by Catatonia was in there. One of my favourite songs that I felt hardly anyone ever plays anymore, Drinking in LA by Brand Band 3000. It's got such an awesome soundtrack, because you do get the feeling that that Callum is kind of like an alternative kind of person, like that's his kind of music, but they need to mix it in with some of the popular tracks that are being played at this resort in Turkey at the same time. So an absolutely amazing soundtrack as well. It was one of those soundtracks that I rushed out and found it on Spotify as soon as I left the cinema. So a great soundtrack. Yeah,
like it for the time of where the majority of the movie is set, like mid to late 90s. Of course, they're going to be playing. They're going to be playing the Macarena. And the types of Aqua music that was playing back then. It really, you can tell that this is really a deeply personal movie for Charlotte Wells, and in some ways that making this movie might have been some level of catharsis for her to kind of get a way to just examine her own the past that she had with her own father.
Definitely. And like I said, I think that is partly why this is so natural as well, because she's experienced it. It's not a film like a sci-fi or a fantasy or even a drama where someone has sat down and gone, you know what, I want to write a drama about a dad that's suicidal going on holidays. This is written by someone who has experienced it and been through it. So that instantly brings a more natural kind of feel to the screenplay, and I think that tugs at the heartstrings a little bit more with this film as well. Like when you're watching it, because it feels so natural and not forced like The Sun. Like, to compare this to The Sun is a great example. Like with The Sun, yes, it kind of emotionally affected you a little bit, but it didn't affect me the same way as what Aftersun did. Like, I'll just put it that way. So I think that naturalness with the screenplay is what actually caused that to have that more natural kind of feel. So
I think it being somewhat ambiguous as to what exactly is the reason that Sophie hasn't seen her father in so long. Like, it's made very clear that this is the last time that they are together.
Yeah.
With some very well done takes at the end, which I can't really go into, but it's not ever really said why, and obviously you can draw your own conclusions throughout it, and I think that really helps the movie because it allows the audience to kind of come up with something that maybe reflects their own past a little bit more than just. I think that's why maybe this was a lot more effective than The Sun was, when The Sun is obviously trying to be a lot more of a heavier, much more emotionally devastating movie. I think this one worked just a whole lot more than that did.
Definitely. So I guess to wrap it up, what are you going to give this 1 out of 5 and why?
I'm going to give this 4.5 out of 5. I think it's an amazing debut picture from Charlotte Wells, and for her first movie to already have earned the lead actor an Oscar nomination, and for us to be thinking, you know what, I think it deserved more Oscar nominations. I think she's done an amazing job here. The actors, the two lead actors in this are brilliant, and it's just, it does something very different very well. And so 4.5 out of 5 from me.
I'm actually kind of surprised that Charlotte Wells didn't get a nomination as well, to be brutally honest, especially for the screenplay especially. Definitely. So sometimes I don't know what's going on with those Oscar nominations, but I'm giving it 4.5 as well. I thought this was an absolutely brilliant film. Great script, great performances, looks brilliant, and affects you emotionally, and this great soundtrack as well. So I'm going to give it 4.5. So that means that both of us have given Aftersun 4.5 stars. And that's it for this episode of the Popcorn Conspiracy on Location. I'm Dave G.
And I've been Kyle.
And we'll be back soon with another episode.